But there is some concern, a lot of concern among Republicans about the rise of anti-Semitic hard-right figures in your movement, especially after Tucker Carlson hosted white nationalist Nick Fuentes on his...
Okay, I don't think MTG. Marjorie Taylor Greene literally hired Milo Yiannopoulos. And I'm pretty sure she still has a direct connection to Milo Yiannopoulos, okay? You need to understand something like that is... Also, Marjorie Taylor Greene said Jewish space lasers did wildfires. Like, what are we talking about? She is the elected representative version of Nick Fuentes, or at least used to be. What the fuck? I mean, look, I'm here for the heel turn. I'm here to watch him fight, okay? Yeah, she spoke at, I think, a Nick Fuentes conference, like an America First conference. So let's see what she says.
Didn't question Fuentes about his vile language or views. You did speak at a conference hosted by Fuentes back in 2022. You were criticized, and you said then that you didn't know about his views. Well, Fuentes talked to Carlson about that in the interview. Listen to what he said.
Well, again, with Marjorie.
Yeah, also, Dana Bash is the last person to fucking complain about Nick Fuentes. I'm sorry, okay? Before people go, two wrongs don't make a right or whatever, she literally has had Randy Fine on her fucking broadcast, okay? It's ridiculous. And also, Dana Bash herself has similar opinions. Maybe not as extreme as Randy Fine, but like Dana Bash is also fucking pro-Israel, you know? Israel's doing a genocide. Like, this is a real instance of violence that's currently taking place that she is in support of. This is the dynamic that frustrates me so much, because as someone who finds Nick Fuentes' politics to be repugnant, I also find pro-Israel politics to be equally as repugnant. That's it. That's what's so fucking annoying about this shit, where it's like, you can, like, this only reaffirms what people see, the inconsistency that people see in American politics, which is you can be as horrible as you want to every single marginalized identity except for Jewish people. Now, many liberals, I don't think, actually operate like that, but members of the media do operate like that, it seems. Like, that's what I'm seeing from the way that they are tailoring their commentary here. And there are others who have also pointed this out. Nick Fuentes is anti-Semitic, but this level of outreach from Dana Bash is disingenuous. CNN has interviewed Randy Fine multiple times, and they've never held him accountable for any of his vicious Islamophobia. They have no problem when other groups are being targeted. Yeah, this kind of stuff is visible first and foremost to the right-wingers, by the way. They see this shit. And when they see that inconsistency, it causes them to lean further into anti-Semitic conspiracies. You know what I mean? It is such a glaringly obvious double standard that I think even the dumbest guy can recognize it. And then they go, oh, I'm noticing. It's like, if Nick Fuentes never said what he has said about Jews, but instead said it about every other minority, as he does, for the record, he does say those things about every minority, right? He would not be in this kind of trouble. It's obvious.
I was a friend of hers, and she spoke at my conference, and then the day after, she pretended like she didn't know me. She pretended like she didn't know me and lied and said I had no idea the conference I was speaking at. She knew exactly what it was.
What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, I defend every single person's free speech rights. I think that's incredibly important. So I don't apologize for that, and I don't believe in canceling people. And I think it's important for people like Tucker Carlson and yourself to interview everyone. I don't believe in trying to cancel someone by refusing to interview them and question them. And I did speak at his conference back in 2022. However, I don't know Nick Fuentes. He's someone I've never exchanged text messages with or phone calls, but I did speak at his conference. That was the first time I had met him that day, and that was it. But I did watch the interview. I watched the full interview with Tucker, and I admire him for interviewing many people as well as exposing a lot of powerful information.
I hear what you're saying.
He does on his show.
I hear what you're saying about free speech. I mean, count me as guilty as a proponent of free speech. There's free speech, and then there is hate speech. And this is a man invited on a really prominent conservative show who said, even during that interview, he had a problem with, quote, organized Jewry, and he wasn't challenged on it. In the past, he has...
Yeah, once again, why free speech and there's hate speech? Okay. CNN host attacked Tucker Carlson for hosting the Fuentes. Fair enough, but they've hosted Randy Fine multiple times, who has been openly as violent and as racist as Fuentes. But because Fine called for violence against Palestinians, CNN sees that as just standard political discourse. And Randy Fine hasn't just called for violence against Palestinians. He's also called for violence against Muslim congresspersons like Ilhan Omar, for example, and Muslims in the United States of America. Randy Fine is more overtly Islamophobic than even Nick Fuentes is overtly anti-Semitic, because like there is still a degree of stigma, institutional stigma specifically, around anti-Semitism. So Nick Fuentes has to like dial it back, and it still comes out, right, at times, but no such institutional stigma exists for Islamophobia. So Randy Fine gets to say whatever the fuck he wants about Muslims. And the thing is, this is a reality that Nick Fuentes himself is aware of, and he will use to his advantage. Here it is. Look.
Even those people that are criticizing Israel. Because to say it's about Zionism or about a genocide is really just not even...
Are you okay with anti-Semitism but not Islamophobia? Can you point to a single moment where I've said I'm okay with anti-Semitism? Can you actually point to a single instance where I've ever actually allowed anti-Semitism to manifest in this community? You can't. I fight against anti-Semitism every single fucking day. Every single day. My bad, King. I was curious. Okay. What's frustrating about this process, like what's frustrating about this dynamic, is that it also feeds into anti-Semitism. That's it. Like it's just
the whole picture here. So Dasha Nekrasova got fired by Hollywood for hosting an anti-Semitic person that says Jews run Hollywood. Insane. But we all know this is how it goes. We all know this is the way it works.
What do you think about Mohammed El-Kurd tweet about Jewish supremacy? Israel is a Jewish supremacist nation. Zionism is a Jewish supremacist politics. It's a Jewish supremacist ideology. It's fascist. It is true. I don't even know what Mohammed El-Kurd said, but everybody gets so in their fucking feelings about this. But there is a degree. It's interesting because Zionism is billed to the in-group as a Jewish supremacist ideology, except at the same time, it does have a higher degree of priority for whiteness as well, which is part of the reason why you have like 1 million Russians who aren't ethnically or religiously Jewish that have Israeli citizenship, for example. So like it's first and foremost a settler colonial project, right? So it's not even like it's more complicated than black and white, if that makes sense. Also, yeah, Dasha is a great example of this inconsistency. Dasha from Red Scare has been photographed dressing at Target as in the gun range as a Palestinian. She's friends with other Nazis as well. She's done a whole bunch of stuff. She said horrible things. She has been actively presenting herself as like a reactionary. So it wasn't her own racism that actually got her to be dropped from her talent agency. It was actually her collaboration with Nick Fuentes that did it. And that, to me, once again, reinforces this double standard.
And you have to consider the following. When Trump got elected, there was this feeling that cancel culture was over, right? Am I wrong in saying this? A year ago, I think you could even say it was the consensus that comedy had been legalized and cancel culture is over, and a spirit of liberalization, and by that I mean openness, had come to America. That we'd emerged on the other side of the woke, cancel culture, political correctness, the peak of that, which might have been reached, let's say, arguably in 2022 or 2023. And this had a lot to do with Elon acquiring Twitter and other things. But what we have seen ever since then is that was really just half the story. Cancel culture did not end. It ended about certain topics. You have license to be cruel to brown people. Am I wrong? That's what that meant. When people said cancel culture was over, it meant that you can say offensive things about black people again, about brown people, about Muslims. And our Republican Party and our Republican government and the conservative movement was willing to look the other way. They said, now we're willing to tolerate cruelty and abuse and stereotypes and jokes and offensive things and maybe, you know, a degree of identity politics from white people and against non-whites, the third world, Muslims, barbarians, even about women. J.D. Vance said that it's liberal cat ladies, it's white liberal cat ladies that he hates the most. They're the biggest problem. So they tolerated all this.
It's so funny because, like, this is the purest expression of Republican politics, reactionary politics. He's a Nazi, right? And Nazi fascism or white Christian nationalism, which is like what his version of it is, in the United States of America, is the purest expression, the purest distillation of Republican politics. It's the core, which is why it's so alluring for many. And that is the reason why it's so terrifying for a lot of people in the Republican Party, because they don't want to go to that degree. They don't want to go there. They don't want to take it there. And not because they're fearful that, like, the Republican Party is going to do the Holocaust to Electric Boogaloo or something. They don't want to go there because they don't give a shit about Jews either. Let's be real. Like, the Republicans in power don't give a shit about Jews either. Okay? But this actually threatens America's continued allegiance with Israel. It creates too much discontent. And because it's the purest form of reactionary politics, it presents a real threat for institutional power. Because if you were to have someone who actually is genuinely anti-Israel and genuinely anti-Semitic, then all of a sudden, if they were able to win office, then they could change the trajectory of American foreign policy, at least in the way that Americans, in the way that the State Department deals with Israel, in the way that State Department has a seemingly never-ending loyalty to Israel. That's the reason why Republicans are afraid.
But the one group that is totally outside criticism, the one group that is totally outside accountability is Jews. If you talk about the way they're organized, the way they behave, you get fired. You lose your job. And by the way, this is what Ye was talking about a few years ago.
I think it's so insane that one of the things pay close attention to his words. One of the things that he's doing here, aside from saying the literal N-word, is that he is trying to make it seem like his racism is actually simple criticism and accountability. It's fucking bullshit. Okay? It's bullshit. Where he turns around and makes it seem as though, like, oh, well, you know, conservative Jews hate black people and liberal Jews hate white people. Everyone gets to hate on everybody except for Jewish people, right? He masquerades or tries to make it seem like pure, unfiltered racism and bigotry is actually not an idiotic form of hatred, but instead reasonable criticism, right? It's ridiculous. Hasanabi's not saying it's based in true. He clearly doesn't agree with him. Obviously, I don't. People are just 2 to 3 years ago, you try to not give this fucking idiot attention, and now his name and actions are being brought up directly to the president. What a timeline. I know. And you have to understand. You have to understand something, okay? None of this is acceptable. In polite society, none of this should be acceptable. I'm in favor of no bigotry, not all bigotry. If Nick Fuentes is in favor of all bigotry, I'm on the exact opposite of that, where I'm saying none of it is acceptable. But the very fact that the media does have a carve out almost that they cynically weaponize too, because it's not just the media getting mad about anti-Semitism. It's also oftentimes the media getting mad at things that aren't even anti-Semitic that they present as anti-Semitism. And the only takeaway for the average American from that conversation is, okay, what the fuck? Is this what we have to worry about all the goddamn time? Like nonstop? Especially considering that at least currently, this might change, and it wasn't the same throughout history, but at least currently, there is no systematic discrimination against Jews in the same way that there is for black people, for example, or brown people, right? There is discrimination against Jews. Jews are a marginalized population, at least historically, right? And people still do hate crimes against Jewish people, but there is no systemic discrimination against Jews in contemporary American society in the way that it used to exist. Like Jews not being able to go to college, for example, or Jews not being able to Jews being systematically discriminated against. That used to exist in this country. In modern society, it does not. And in the absence of that, there is still a tremendous amount of coverage, hyper focusing on both real anti-Semitic incidents and even things that are not anti-Semitic being presented as anti-Semitism. And that makes most people who aren't Jewish, who have never been around Jewish people, look at the situation and go, why the fuck do we care about this? What the hell is going on? And that's exactly how people like Nick Fuentes can present themselves as truth tellers, as people who have identified this inconsistency and are unafraid to say it. If you want to understand how this person has been able to rise to such a degree of prominence, it's primarily because of Israel, and more consequentially, it is the way that our organs of the media, the way that they have covered this issue, the way that they have actually defended Israel or contextualized Israel's violence or attacked Israel's critics. David Frum compared you and Zoran to Nick. They're downplaying this Nazi. Exactly. Who is the national Democrat who will speak as honestly and courageously about Mamdani and Piker as Ted Cruz has spoken about Carlson and Fuentes? The disease is worse than the GOP side, but the immune system is weaker on the Democratic side. This is ridiculous. Like, this is incredibly sinister. David Frum is a pro-Israel stooge, right? He writes for The Atlantic, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He literally is an Israeli concentration camp guard, or was an Israeli concentration camp guard. There are still a lot of people who don't fucking understand. I mean, he's a war criminal himself. David Frum is, right? One of the prominent champions of the Iraq War, right? But the point is, yeah, to give specific examples of what you're saying, Jews used to be excluded from bar associations, used to be excluded from country clubs, used to be excluded from working at companies and unions and et cetera, et cetera. They are not any longer, right? I think it's crazy that you could easily clip Fuentes here, and it seems like a sentiment most of us agree with. He literally says the end of woke just means a green light for cruelty to brown people. Out of context, it's just him saying this is a good thing. It sounds like him calling out a real societal ill. Exactly, that's the problem, okay? That is precisely the problem. And people like this, people like David Frum, people who are conservative, but on the liberal side, or, you know, go back and forth, centrist, conservative, liberal, Zionists, unironically lean into this shit. I have a policy of being honest, first and foremost. And this is a dishonest comparison, okay? This is a dishonest comparison. You are trying to compare me to a Holocaust denier. You are trying to compare me to a person that believes that the what did he say? The organized Jewry is fundamentally playing a fundamental role in, like, undermining Western civilizational supremacy. These are not things that I believe. These are things that I actually oppose and talk about quite openly. These are politics that I find despicable. As a matter of fact, part of the reason why I also despise Israel and Zionism is because it is also another version of fascism. Nick Fuentes' politics, but with different victims, okay? But the more you do stuff like this, the more David Frums of the world do stuff like this, the more people look at this and go, okay, I know this guy Hassan. Maybe I don't like him that much, but I've literally seen him yell at Nazis for years and years. And you guys are calling him anti-Semitic too. Who is not anti-Semitic then? Only people who are pro-Israel? What the fuck is that? Watching this vid is acceptable. Seems like we're backdooring his views here. Let Trump platform him. Doesn't mean we have to. Shut the fuck up. All right, new hater unlocked. Guy who refuses to recognize how devastating American politics is becoming, that thinks I'm the one who's actually sheepdogging people in the direction of anti-Semitic fascism because I'm analyzing why Nick Fuentes is gaining more prominence by talking about broader systematic and cultural forces at play that have arrived Americans at this position where they're so open-minded to this kind of commentary. Guys, I saw a tweet the other day that I think is really good. And it reminded me of, in this moment, I'm reminded of this tweet that I saw, right? There was someone fucking complaining about like one battle after another. And they were complaining that like they saw it in the movie theaters and people were laughing at the wrong things and clapping at the wrong things, right? And someone quote retweeted that and said, now that woke is coming back, and I'm very excited for it, we have to cut some parts of woke 1 out from the equation, so woke 2 is a little bit cleaner. And this kind of like your content consumption is activism version. Your content consumption is actually a true form of activism type of woke needs to go away. You're platforming. I will refuse to understand the nuance of what you're doing here and just get angry at you. It needs to go away. We can't do that in woke 2, okay? That was one of the more annoying parts of woke 1. Something that I push back a lot. We got to stop that. Platforming as a criticism has always been so pointless. No, it's not necessarily pointless. If there is a fucking no-name, nonsensical neo-Nazi and plucking them from irrelevance is platforming them. But if that fucking neo-Nazi has already dined with the goddamn president and is now being quoted in mainstream news every single day and is causing a genuine fissure in the Republican Party, then it's no longer platforming. You're just a fucking moron if you think that that is platforming. You cannot platform someone who already has a massive platform, okay? You can't do that. There is no such thing as platforming when someone is on Tucker Carlson, when someone is getting called out by name in the Heritage Foundation and clearly causing a fissure within the Republican Party. If you think that that's platforming, you're a fucking idiot, okay? Shut up. Anyway, yeah. Woke 2 making a big comeback means we're going to have to start cutting these parts of woke 1 off like dead limbs if we want to survive. Watching movies is the right/wrong way. Activism is not a style of criticism anybody's interested in hearing about in 2015. Yes, we can't do that. Even if it's criticism that's valid, we can't do that. Anyway, let's finish this fucking thing. Hold on.
That suck, and Hispanics. And you'll have Jews on the left that'll attack, white people, and Jews on the right will attack black people. But the one group that is totally outside.
Guys, you need to stop with this. At least pause the video next time, please. Stop. Also gone and woke 2. Too emotional. You want me to baby you, okay? You're a fucking adult. Stop. You're being fucking annoying. And I know the more I talk about it, the more you're going to make this your primary fucking reason for why you are mad. It's okay. It's going to be all right. I promise you. Stop. Some of you want me to change your diapers, okay?
Skepticism, the one group that is totally outside accountability is Jews. If you talk about the way they're organized, the way they behave, you get fired. You lose your job. And by the way, this is what Ye was talking about a few years ago. He was talking about it this year. He said, if I make a song about killing black people, it goes triple platinum. If I make a song about being a gangbanger and killing black people, other black people, and abortion and violence, then I'm a triple platinum recording artist. I'm honored at the Grammys. I'm honored at the White House. I'm honored by Rolling Stone magazine and the New York Times. If I make a song called Heil Hitler,
like, this is, again, another incredibly fucking idiotic argument. A rapper talking about his own fucking personal experiences growing up, which might include fucking violence, is entirely different than someone highlighting Adolf Hitler, okay? A ruthless Nazi mass murderer. What the fuck? These are all a sequence of false equivalencies that unironically work with the dumbest people in society. It's the same reason why people can always get away with, oh, you can make fun of white people, but if I say something about black people, all of a sudden it's a big problem. Yeah, it is. Because white people, especially in the United States of America or in the Western world, have never been systematically discriminated against on the virtue of their fucking whiteness. They have been discriminated against and ruthlessly brutalized on the virtues of class. As a class issue, yes, this is true. And it's so fucking annoying that every time you try to answer the reverse racism shit, people just want like no context, no nuance, just black and white answers. And if you are If you are incapable of nuanced thinking, then yes, this works so well for you. You go to reverse racism. Yeah, you're right. Why is it that? Why is it acceptable? Okay, why is it acceptable? I think I want this absurd comparison. It makes me feel better. Okay, every single thing that he's dropping in here is actually super old school Republican politics, which is why I always say Nick Fuentes' politics is the purest distillation of reactionary politics. What he's saying here, maybe not about like, you know, the anti-Semitism, but what he's saying here is what you heard from Bill O'Reilly, what you heard from Glenn Beck, what you heard from Rush Limbaugh over and over and over again. The notion that, you know, I say one thing about how violent and angry these blacks are, and everybody gets up in a tiffy, but you can say whatever you want about white people in America and no one gets mad. This double standard is ridiculous. It's like, that's not a real double standard. That's not a real double standard because there has been no active, systematic form of oppression against white people, both at any point in American history, on the basis of whiteness. Okay? Nobody was enslaved purely because they were white. That's the reason. This is also the reason why the N-word is not just a mean word that hurts black people's feelings, but it's more so a reflection of white supremacist history, a reminder of white supremacist history, and a consistent demand to restore that racial pecking order, or to remind people that that racial pecking order to some degree still exists. It is a way to dehumanize every single black person across the board. That's the reason. Without chattel slavery, the N-word would not be as consequential. Without colonial extraction and the rape of Africa, the N-word would not, it would be like cracker, I guess. It's such a strange alternative universe that it's impossible to actually think about that alternative universe. But like, that is the reason why the N-word is as powerful as it is, right? But a lot of white people, I don't think, understand this. They just think, oh, it's just a mean word that black people get offended by. Why are they so fucking offended? That's it. What about the people who point out that black people also enslaved other black people? Oh, my Lord. To attribute a unique form of violence that is chattel slavery, that even historians acknowledge is separate, that was racialized by design to black people is one of the most insane statements of all time. Okay? Chattel slavery and the consumption and the beneficiaries of chattel slavery were white people. How many black slavers were in the US? Like 20? No, I don't even think they're talking about black slavers specifically. I think they're talking about like the African tribal leaders that would engage in tribal warfare and then would, in certain instances, sell off the victims of whatever sect that they had dominated to the Westerners that came in. And if you actually looked at the history of African development, there were plenty of instances where the Western world straight up did not want Africa to develop and did not want to actually take advantage of any of the other material resources that Africa was very wealthy in. Africa has been a very wealthy continent, very materially rich, very resource-rich continent. And historically, Western colonialists have decided, we don't want any of that shit. We only want people. We only want slaves. If you look to the history of trade in Africa, in many instances, people pushed back against this. And in many instances, they wanted to engage in normal trade, and yet they were stopped. They did not want competition. Western colonists did not want competition with other material resources that were being extracted. They simply wanted human beings to enslave. In any case, let's get back to this guy.
He said, if I make a song about killing black people, it goes triple platinum. If I make a song about being a gangbanger and live on my show on Monday, this coming Monday, and I said, fuck Islam. I said, these Muslims need to go home. Fuck them. They're barbarians. They're third worldists. They like to live in open sewage and bomb crap. You think any conservative would disavow me? Any of them? Any Republican? You think if I was known for saying that, do you think I would have any trouble getting in?
He's talking about Ben Shapiro, by the way. Ben Shapiro has said those things. Palestinian Arabs like to bomb shit and live in sewage. That was a Ben Shapiro quote.
To CPAC or the New York Young Republican Club Gala or the GOP? Of course not, because Laura Loomer has access to the White House and she says stuff like that. Ben Shapiro has access to Trump and he says stuff like that. Could you imagine? Not to be a boomer here.
This is precisely the contradiction that people like Nick Fuentes will consistently exploit. Okay? It's true. And that is exactly why he has risen to prominence. Because if your entire political machine revolves around dominating marginalized groups, okay, dominating out groups, built around this association with whiteness as the in group, okay, but then you still hold a special place and special emphasis for one version of bigotry, then of course people like Nick Fuentes will exploit that over and over again. The worst thing that you can do is allow your enemy to have a correct argument, okay? That is the worst possible thing you can do. Okay, the Groypers are in here now. First-time chatters.
Would you imagine if the shoe were on the other foot? It has to be left unsaid. Could I turn around and say F Judaism and those Jews and send them back to Israel? Like, it's literally unthinkable to even say the words. But we all know it's tolerated with Muslims. We all know it's tolerated with blacks. We all know it's tolerated with Hispanics, Asians. And yes, for far too long, it was tolerated against whites and Christians. And that's just the part that got left out. But now that we have this culture of liberalization and political correctness is dead and racial humor is back, everybody's engaging in it. But if you say anything about them, it's a big problem. Even if it's, as we talked about with this idea of a global Jewry, oh, now it's anti-Semitic? Now people are going to lose their jobs again? Here's the point. Cancel culture never ended. Cancel culture was always about this, and I think people even underestimated that.
He loves to play victim. I was banned from CPAC, debanked, and banned on social media sites because I spoke the truth about Islam. He will never admit that, though, because he's a pathological liar. I love Laura Loomer responded to drop site news on here. If you had said any of that about Christians, you would not be allowed back into America. No, that's not true. America's a Christian nation first and foremost, okay? It was built by WASPs. It's a WASP nation. You can absolutely get away with saying shit like that about Christians, just like you can absolutely get away with saying shit like that about white people. But that is a cultural resentment that a lot of people like Nick Fuentes also take advantage of, where they're like, why can you say this about white people? And it is my job to explain to people why there is a difference here, okay? There's a difference between like someone saying something mean while they're engaging in analysis versus someone just being like openly fucking racist against marginalized identities. What is this? These Nazis always projecting? Oh no, not property violence. What is this? I can't see it. Anyway. Fuentes takes Trumpism to his natural conclusion. People like Rufo or Walsh have too much to gain personally in terms of career opportunities or money to truly support tearing down the system. They've tied the market capitalism, which gets in the way. From Groyper's POV, there's no fundamental difference between neoliberalism or neoconservatism. This is not true for the post-COVID right. They are just going to vote Republican forever and ever. No matter who the nominee is, they would vote for Randy Fine. What? Fuentes might even be more depraved than MAGA, but he's also an intelligent, tactical, sophisticated political actor in a way that his far-right compatriots aren't. It's equal parts refreshing and terrifying to be confronted with a fascist who actually has a brain in his head. I mean, yeah, I think that definitely is a danger. I admit that. That is definitely dangerous. The bar is very, I don't know about refreshing. The words that person is using is ridiculous, but he at least can carry himself like a person who has read a book. Okay? And that is an incredibly high bar to, incredibly low bar to clear, but one that he actually does clear for right-wing politics. Okay? Convert him to our side? There is no conversion for a person like Nick Fuentes. What the fuck are you guys talking about? What do I always say? You can actually change regular people's minds, people who have been duped by the likes of Nick Fuentes, but you can't fucking change Nick Fuentes' mind when his entire goal is to do the conversion himself. You can talk to your friends. You can talk to people that you meet in the real world who might actually have these kinds of morally repugnant attitudes. You can talk to them. You can gently move them to your side. But you can't actually convert people who have a financial interest in presenting themselves a certain way. Okay? At that point, doesn't even matter if it's a sincerely held belief or if it's something that they're doing because they realize that they get more recognition that way. They get more prominence that way, right? But yeah, the reason why we talked about this is because Dana Fash and CNN in general has had Randy Fine over and over again without ever calling into question some of the horrifying things that he has said. But let's be real, it's because he said that about appropriate groups. He said that about groups that nobody gives a shit about, nobody cares to defend. This inconsistency, especially on the right, will always be weaponized. Especially on the right, will always be abused. Because right-wing politics can never be about improving the material conditions of the working class. It is inherently reactionary. It's opposed to that, and therefore they play in the waters of culture war narratives, and therefore they talk quite a bit about petty grievances of the in-group, petty grievances of white people, perceived victimhood of white men. And a big part of that allegiance is around, especially for young men in particular, is around being able to just be as ruthless and as bigoted as you want to be, right? You're a pussy if you can't say slurs like, oh my God, you can't say the R word? Oh, what a bitch, right? Oh, I voted for Donald Trump because I can say the R word again, right? There are people who have done that. So if that's the core of your politics, if that's the core of your fucking politics, then of course Nick Fuentes is going to be the purest distillation of that, paired up with dramatic attitude shifts against Israel, swinging from either not really knowing what the fuck Israel is or just being unconditionally pro-Israel to, oh my God, Israel is a fucking the cancerous entity in the region that is so destructive to all of its neighbors, and that you should be able to call it out without it getting any fucking significant pushback, and yet people keep constantly fucking yelling at you and saying you're anti-Semitic, and you arrive at this media demon reaching a level of prominence. And he can very easily navigate this. This discourse by, one, exposing the contradictions by saying, oh, you get mad at me for saying this about Jews, but everybody is saying whatever kind of heinous shit about black people, about Muslims in general, which he also says, by the way. Like, he is on the exact opposite of this argument that I'm on, right? Like, we are on the exact polar opposites. I think all of that is unacceptable and fucked up. He thinks it's all acceptable and permissible. And if you can't make a distinction between those two things, if you can't decide, which side is right, which side is wrong, and you just go, no, they're both the same, I'm in the center and they're both seemingly the same, then you're basically allowing that kind of politics to be the norm. That's it.
With anti-Semite Nick Fuentes, Tucker Carlson, what role do you think Tucker Carlson should play in the Republican Party, the conservative movement going forward?
Well, I found him to be good. I mean, he said good things about me over the years. I think he's good. We've had some good interviews. I did an interview with him. We had 300 million hits. You know that. Look, I can't tell him. Will you let me finish my statement? You're with Bloomberg, right? You are the worst. I don't know why they even have you. We've had some great interviews with Tucker Carlson, but you can't tell him who to interview. I mean, if he wants to interview Nick Fuentes, I don't know much about him, but if he wants to do it, get the word out. Let him, people have to decide. Ultimately, people have to decide. The mayor of New York, I will say, would like to meet with us, and we'll work something out. But he would like to come to Washington and meet, and we'll work something out. We want to see everything work out well for New York.
Nice. We're fucking cooked. What are the broader implications of Trump not distancing himself here? I mean, he sees what's happening, I think. It's amazing how totally ignorant Trump is of the open war of the next GOP that's already breaking out all around him, totally uninterested in it, unconcerned about shaping it because he's completely incapable of thinking beyond his own tenure, lamest duck imaginable. I don't think that's the case here. And GT here says, I don't think that's quite right. Both Trump and Vance have clearly refused to condemn. Both Trump and Vance have clearly refused to condemn Tucker and Fuentes. The reasonable inference is they think about the Groypers as a part of the movement, perhaps not to be openly embraced, but certainly not to be disavowed. Yeah, they can't afford to piss them off too much of their calculation. That's exactly the calculation is much more important than the drama at Heritage, but strangely under-discussed. Exactly. He knows that the next generation of Republicans is like that. The next generation of Republicans is like that. And he is worried about offending them. There's another question that he was asked about Nick Fuentes here. Let's see.
I did it with Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago a few years ago. What role should he play in the conservative movement?
Well, I didn't know he was coming, and he was with, as you know, somebody, Kanye. And Kanye asked if he could have dinner, and he brought Nick. I didn't know Nick at the time. And he did. He came, and along with a few other people. He brought a few people with him. Meeting people, talking to people, like for somebody like Tucker, that's what they do. You know, people are controversial. Some are, some aren't. I'm not controversial, so I like it that way.
I did it with Nick Fuentes at Mar-a-Lago a few years ago. What
That's crazy. I mean, he's just straight up saying like, nope, this is the new meta. Why would Trump care about the next generation of Republicans? Because they're working as his staffers. They're a part of the base. They're eligible to vote. They're a wing of the party, and he can't stand to lose of his loyalists at this point. He can't. There is Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nick Fuentes that Nick Fuentes is Islamophobic as fuck, but will literally just Nick Fuentes is Islamophobic as fuck and racist as fuck, but he's at least smart enough to be like, oh, really? You think it's unacceptable for me to say something about Jews, but you know, you have Randy Fine on, and he can say whatever the fuck he wants about Muslims. Why? Marjorie Taylor Greene is not smart enough. That's why Nick Fuentes is more dangerous. Do you understand? Nick Fuentes is smart enough to actually address that, to hit that as a line. Nick Fuentes would praise Hitler and is openly anti-Semitic, says Republicans are hypocrites for tolerating cruelty and abuse towards Muslims, black people, and other minorities while drawing the line at anti-Semitism. He argues his own politics are simply the logical endpoint of that bigotry. It's true. He's right. It's literally fucking true. Republicans, I mean, I've been saying that. I've been saying that nonstop. Fascism is the purest distillation of reactionary politics. It is the logical endpoint, the logical conclusion of the Republican Party in this country. And unlike Pat Buchanan and even Richard Spencer, as a matter of fact, it seems that Nick Fuentes came at the right time, okay? Because he's not the first. Why does the wording sound like he's been watching your streams? I'm certain that he does. I'm sure he does. At the right time, yes. At the right time to seize on, at the right time as in a time where the Republican Party is more open to an actual acknowledgement of fascist politics. No, that chatter is talking about Nick Fuentes' own analysis of him being the logical endpoint of Republican politics, which is true, and it's an analysis that I've actually engaged with quite a bit. But what Nick wants to happen is let's be racist against everyone, even the Jews. Unlike you say let's end bigotry against everyone. The lesson they get from that is not to end racism, but let's normalize it for all under free speech, America First flag. Yeah, I know, that's my point. We are on the diametrical opposite worldviews here.